Hello YouTube! Welcome to Coding with Dom. I'm Dom and this is me coding. If you enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, share it with your grandma, ring the bell, do whatever you have to do. Today we will be looking at the Nightwatch API in a bit more depth. Last time we finished off by just setting up Nightwatch with the basic configuration, and we wrote a very simple test just to make sure that everything was working. What I'd like to do today is have a look at how to actually write more of a real life scenario kind of test. We're just using the basic API. So we're just going to be using commands, assertions to submit a query on the Google Advanced Search. So I think one of the most common scenarios when we're testing with end-to-end testing is submitting a form. It's usually click, fill in some data, submit, and then check that there's a expected behavior. That's most of what I've seen in end-to-end testing throughout my career has been a series of clicks and inserting values, and then a series of assertions to make sure that those clicks and inserting values had the expected behavior. So I hope that with what you're going to see today, you will be able to cover most of what you want to do with your tests. And in later videos, we'll be looking at how to make these scripts a bit more modular, how to make sure that you're not repeating the same code over and over again. But to start off with, we have to figure out how to actually write tests. So today will be a chance to have a look at the API in a bit more depth and have a look at how some of the basic commands actually work. So, like I just mentioned, we're going to be testing the Google Advanced Search form. This is what it looks like if you've never seen it. I chose a random form. I started looking for HTML5 example forms, PHP example forms. I couldn't find anything, and so I ended up just using this. I had a sneak peek at how it works, but we're going to look, I'm going to pretend that I don't know how it works, and we're going to explore it together. And my goal is this: I want to search for Elon Musk, and I want to search for results in Italian, and I want to make sure that the results have been loaded in the past week. There are a few options here that allowed us to do this. So basically, just to mimic what I'll be doing, I'll be writing Elon Musk here. I will be looking for results in Italian. Here we are, Italian, and I hope that the last update will be in the past week. And then I'll be clicking on Advanced Search, and basically what I will be checking as an assertion step in my test is make sure that there are specific query parameters in the URL, and I also want to make sure that Elon Musk appears here and that we have search Italian pages in the past month. So I just tested the thing manually, and now we can recreate this in Nightwatch. So the first thing we want to do is create a new file. This is, if you can check out the repository in this status in my previous video. Basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding a commit at the end of each video. So if you want to go through the history of the repository or the history of the videos, you can check out the whole repository and then check out the commit, the git log for the commit that you're looking for, and just check out that specific commit. We left the repository with this single test. What I'm going to be doing now is adding a new file, and I'm just going to call it google.js for simplicity's sake. So google.js module.exports, and as we saw last time, I'm going to be giving this test a name. So we're going to do Google Advanced Search Elon Musk. This is going to receive the browser object, and here we can actually start writing our test. So the first thing we want to do obviously is actually visit the URL. So browser.url, and here I'm going to paste the URL of the advanced search. Then we're going to need a few selectors. So the selector I'm going to need first is this guy. So I inspected the page a little bit before, and what I noticed is that the most consistent thing we have in these pages are the name attributes. So I'm going to be using those a lot. The truth is, when you're testing your website and you have control over the DOM, it's what I've seen as a best practice, and what I've come to learn is a good thing to do, is adding custom attributes for identifying elements in the page. So for instance, you can use something like data attributes, and you can have attributes like data-e2e or data-nightwatch, and then you can give your elements a custom name, and so that it makes more sense when you're using them in your tests. That's one benefit. And the second benefit is that if someone refactors the code, moves the code around, and sees that there's a data-e2e attribute or a data-nightwatch attribute, they know that they might break tests if they don't maintain that, so they will keep that attribute moving around. In this case, this is Google, so I don't have any control over the DOM. We will be looking at an example in future videos of how to run an Express server and how to run the server while you're running tests. So we might have a look at how to use custom attributes better in that video. For the time being, I'm going to stick with name attributes. So the find pages with all these words. So I'm going to grab this name equals ASQ, and I'm going to start defining a few selectors. And in this, I'm going to call main query input selector. So this is this guy, and now I can do set value, which is part of the Nightwatch API, on this main query input selector, and I am going to set Elon Musk. Actually, I'm going to save this too, so we can say that the main query is Elon Musk. So let's set main query. And for debugging this test while I write it, what I'm going to be doing is save screenshot. Now this is a really handy API. I very rarely send this into production unless I need screenshots in various steps, but you might want to structure your tests in a different way, and I usually use this while I'm writing the test just to see intermediate steps and how the test's going. So what you can do is something like tests output, which is the directory where we get the report logs from Nightwatch, and this isn't committed into Git. So I'm going to do tests output google.js, .png. So I'm saving this, and I'm going to do npm test. Now, if you remember, npm test is mapped to Nightwatch. If I run npm test like this, it's going to run all the tests inside this folder. That's not what I want right now. So I have a few options to run just the file that I actually want. If you run npm test with Nightwatch with the help output, you will be able to see various ways to run specific files. You can use test to run a single test, group that will run a group of tests, i.e. a folder, filter, which will specify a filter as in a glob expression for the test file, and tags. You can add specific tags to your tests, for instance something like this, and this will tag your test as a part of the Google group. It will tag the test with a Google tag so that you can actually filter, you can group tests in that way. So I'm going to be using that technique just for demonstration purposes. So I have to do tag and run Google. So if I do this and all goes well, here we go, running the Google test suite, it's opening the advanced search, and an error occurred. So this is because I didn't define the selector properly. It has to have square brackets around it, and I'm also going to do this just for safety's sake. Let's try again. Elon Musk, no assertions ran, so the test went fine, and if I check my screenshot, I can actually see that it wrote Elon Musk where I was expecting it. So good so far. So the next step is for me to set value on these dropdowns. Now, if they were native dropdowns, I could just click on the dropdown and click on the option, and that's basically what we're going to be doing now as well. But these are custom dropdowns, so it took me a little bit just to understand how they're actually working. I'm not going to go through that with you right now because, like I said, you're probably going to know your DOM very well. You're going to know your website very well if you're developing it yourself. So you might not have to go through the hassle of actually figuring out how the website works. So for what we're looking for is this specific language dropdown. For those of you that don't know, I'm using this command to find the element that I'm interested in. And I see that this has an ID, which is LR button. I'm guessing that LR is something like language region. So what I'm going to do is just grab this LR button. I'm going to call it the const. This will be the language drop-down opener selector. And this is LR button with an ID. And once we click on this, if I scroll at the very bottom of the page, you'll see that over here there is the options drop-down. So if I open this, of course, closes. Each language is a Google menu item with a value of language underscore the language that I'm looking for. So what I'm going to be looking for is something like Google menu item value language IT. So let's do that. Language drop down value selector is going to be Google menu item value equals lang IT. Now let's try and click on the language drop down opener, then click on the language drop down value and save the screenshot again. If all goes well, I'm winging it, so I'm hoping this is going to work. We might see an error, but that's no big deal. npm test, tag Google. It was too quick for me to see if it actually worked, but we can just look at the screenshot, and lo and behold, Italian. It works. We can move forward. Next step. Last update, we want to put it on the last month. So again, it's the same process as before. We're going to look for last update. This has an ID of ASQDR. Again, I'm going to hope that this is some sort of syntax. ASQDR I can't really decipher, but that's not important. We're just going to grab the ID, go back into our test, and call this the last update drop down opener selector, and also gonna duplicate this. So last update drop down value, and the value will be let's open this again. Past month is M. That makes sense, which is month. So value M. I'm going to duplicate these two guys so we can run this again. npm test tag Google. It's running. Let's have a look at the screenshot. Past month. Perfect. It's going pretty good so far. So now that I've filled in the form, I actually have to click on the submit button. So let's find the selector for the submit button. It's usually just type submit, but I'm going to add a JFK button just for to stay on the safe side. So I'm going to click on submit button selector. Let's create that const. Now the fact that I'm actually, is this JFK button? Yes. The fact that I'm actually defining the selectors here rather than defining them on the fly inside the test is just a best practice I like to follow. You could define this stuff right in the test itself, but by defining variables for each selector, you have the power to actually give them names and give it a bit more sense. So when I read this test and I see that I'm entering a main query into the main query input, language dropdown, etc., it makes a lot more sense and it makes it a lot more readable. At the moment, I'm defining everything in this page. Like I said, there are some techniques that Nightwatch offers us to move this logic into other places to make our tests even more readable, and we'll look at that soon in the next videos. But for now, let's see if the submit button works, and npm test tag Google. Okay, and if we look at the screenshot, we can see the search results page with Elon Musk, search Italian pages, and past month. Really, really good. We're making progress. So now we can switch to assertions to check whether, so language, Italian, last update, past month. We can switch to assertions to see whether our test is actually checking, if the page is actually rendering what it's supposed to render. So the first thing I want to check is query parameters. I want to make sure that again, I'm going to wing this, so I might not get this right first time, and you might see an edit cut here, but let's see. If you don't see an edit cut, it means I got it right the first time around. So, assert URL contains. I hope I get this right. So we're going to check whether the URL contains this specific thing. And then we're going to save a screenshot just to make sure that it got to the end. Let's see how it goes. Testing if the URL contains. It works. My memory didn't fail me. So we can do that again for each of our parameters. So if you see here, we have a language region equals lang et. That's another thing we want to check. And the ASQDR. So these are the same mappings that we had on the drop-down selectors, if you notice here. So I'm going to be checking that as well. Let's make sure all of this works. Now by default, most of the assertions will just output this default message. So we see testing if the URL contains, and it's very literal. And when I'm reading the logs, this doesn't really make too much sense to me. If I don't know what ASQDR means, I don't know what I'm looking at. So most of the assertion, well, not most of them, I think every assertion that you'll find in the Nightwatch library has a second optional parameter. So you can see here, this is an optional parameter, which is a message. So you can log a message to make things make a bit more sense. So that's what I'm going to be adding here. And I'm going to be adding the query. Query is Elon Musk. Language is Italian. And what was this? Time period is last month. So let's run this again. Bada bing, bada boom. Query is Elon Musk. Language Italian. Time period is last month. Now, right now I'm checking the URL. In your scenario, you won't necessarily have to do this. There are some cases when you want to make sure that the URL and the UI actually match. In this specific scenario, I could just check the UI, but I just wanted to show you how this assert URL contains works. So seeing as I'm going to be checking the UI as well, I'm going to add this, let's put it this way, params and params. Now we want to check the UI, so what I have to look for is the selector for these three elements. The first thing is this guy. So this looks like it has a weird class, but it probably has a name which I can check. Name Q. That looks like our guy. So if I check for input name Q, I get two results, which I'm not a fan of. Let's see if I get a way to get just one result. So when you're writing Nightwatch tests, most commands will allow you to pass a selector that yields more than one result. If you do that, it's considered a bad practice because Nightwatch will simply choose the first element it finds in the page, but you can't be sure that the order will be always the same. The best practice is to find a selector that will yield you one specific result and one result only. So that's what I'm going to be looking for now. If I can, I'll just live with what I have. I feel like these attributes are going to be changing on every page load. I might be wrong, but they seem a bit too random for me to trust these attributes. Search form. So let's try this. ID search form. Success. Now we have only one result, so this is specific enough. And what there are a few ways I could test this. I could get the element and check that the element's text or value is correct. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to test the visibility of the element by adding the extra value attribute on the element tag. So only if the element has the correct value will this be visible. So again, I'm going by memory, and I got the feeling I'm going to get this wrong. So let's see if you get the edit cut in the middle. But element dot, sorry, I'm just going to go to the API page. Let's not wing it this time around. NightwatchJS, we can look at the API reference, and we can expect, this is what I'm looking for, expect the element to be visible. So I am going to go onto a new line here, browser expect element results page query selector, let's call it this, to be visible. Actually, I'm going to keep the save screenshot at the end. Browser. Now, if I grab results page query selector, I have to define results page, and this is the thing that I copied before. And what I'm going to add here is a value. Let's make this a fancy string so that I can do main query. Oh, let's see if this works. Save. And again, is there a way? No, with this, so one of the downsides of this is that I can't add a custom message. I don't believe I can. So the log won't necessarily be very clear. So another thing I can do is browser.assert visible. I'm actually going to switch to that because I prefer to have a more clear log. So what I'm going to do is UI Elon Musk is set in the query input. Let's test this. UI Elon Musk is set in the query input. Okay, so now we can keep moving forward, and we're going to expect these two guys to be visible. Or maybe not. Let's see how they're built. So, actually, I'm not going to expect them to be visible. I'm going to grab the element, and I'm going to make sure that the element has the correct text. That's a better way, I think, to test this thing specifically. So this looks quite specific. Let's see if this is our guy. No, it is not. I'm trying to figure out what the difference between these two guys is. HDTB MNHD HDTB MNHD. This is not really helping us. I may have made a bad choice for this. I could use the ARIA label. I'm not a fan of that, but I guess it's the only way for me to make sure that these two guys are actually different. Again, this is not ideal, but I don't control this DOM. In the next video, I'm going to make sure that I have a website that I'm actually loading so I can control the DOM myself. But this way I'm sure that I'm targeting the right element, so I'm going to just use this. So const language, no, results page language selector is this guy. So we're going to have a results page last update selector as well that says past month. And what I want to do is assert that the it contains a specific text. So I can use this API contains text. What am I looking for? I can't remember what I called it. Here it is. UI language is set to Italian, and last update is set to past month. I actually have to tell it what it should contain. So this guy should contain search Italian pages, and this guy should contain past month. Let's see how it goes. npm test. Ooh, error. Excellent. What did I get wrong? I didn't change this. Results page last update. Let's try again. What am I getting? Okay, that's what I get for just trying to wing it without actually copying things. Past month. There is a lowercase m here. Let me try again. Success. Alright, so this is our test. Google Advanced Search, Elon Musk. We're making sure that params contain query, language, and time period, and the same goes for the UI. It's working. If you want to learn more options in the API, I recommend you go through this API reference. Even if you just have a look at the commands on the left, what you're probably going to be looking at is the assert section and the commands section. Now, the commands protocol section is a bit more complicated to use, so I'm going to be doing a video, dedicated video for that. But if you have a look at the commands, basic commands, wait for element visible, you have click, clear value, submit form, all this kind of stuff. But again, I think most of the things you're going to want to test, you're going to be able to test with just clicks and set values. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, like I said before, share with your friends. And in the next videos, I'll be showing you how to use page objects and how to run a local server and start and stop that server inside your test suite. We're going to start looking at how to reorganize your code, how you can avoid all this duplication. This test script isn't very pretty, even though it gets the job done. So I'll be committing this, and stay tuned for the next video. See you soon.